Dr. Ferrer, you may begin.
Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us for this virtual town hall on the post-fire air, water, and soil assessment plan. I want to begin by thanking everyone who took time to join us tonight, and I hope you'll find the presentations, which will be very brief, useful, but we really look forward to answering your questions and hearing what your concerns are. So thank you for taking time. We want to be as responsive as possible, and that really requires us to find a way to be able to listen to you and respond to what your needs are. So appreciate you all for getting on. I do also want to express deep appreciation to our local, state, and federal partners who have been working tirelessly on the wildfire recovery efforts. Addressing the environmental and health impacts of these fires does require a coordinated and sustained response. And I feel really fortunate that we have so many partners, both from the private sector and the public sector, that are committed to doing this work. I also want to specifically thank Supervisors Horvath and Supervisor Barger for their steadfast leadership. Both supervisors have been unwavering in their commitment to ensuring that residents impacted by the fires receive the resources and support they need to recover and rebuild. Their advocacy has been instrumental in making sure public health remains a top priority throughout this process. And I'll take the first slide. This level of collaboration is really critical to our efforts. The post-fire assessment that we're discussing today is the result of a broad coalition of experts, including county, state, and academic researchers, all coming together with a shared mission. These teams are bringing their expertise in environmental health, toxicology, and air quality to assess potential hazards, inform mitigation strategies, and provide communities with the data they need. And you can see a list of our partners on this slide. I want to personally thank each of these agencies and institutions for their commitment to this work. The dedication that they have to scientific integrity, transparency, and public health protection ensures that we can provide all of you with accurate, timely, and actionable information as we move forward during the recovery process. Tonight, we're fortunate to have several of these experts to share their knowledge and answer your questions. These panelists represent expertise in air quality, soil safety, water health, and environmental science. Each of them brings a wealth of experience and dedication to protecting the health and well-being of residents. These experts are uniquely equipped to provide the guidance we hope you'll benefit from, and I'll be introducing them shortly to share their valuable insights. To start, I do want to give you an overview of how we'll manage the town hall. We're going to begin with, as I noted, some brief remarks from our panelists, and then we'll spend the rest of the time answering your questions. Thanks to everyone who already sent in questions. We actually have hundreds. But as a reminder, you can send in questions in the chat on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. And we'll be pulling those off and getting to as many questions as we can. We also, and I'll go to the next slide, have live Spanish translation services during our event tonight. Para escuchar en español, por favor, llame al 1-800-805-1150. Before we move to opening remarks from our panelists, I want to highlight an important new resource for residents, and that's the post-fire assessment page. Public Health remains committed to providing clear, science-based information to help communities stay informed about the risks associated with wildfire recovery and the steps that can be taken to reduce these risks. The next slide. We do encourage everyone to visit our post-fire assessment webpage, which you can find by visiting the wildfire page at publichealth.lacounty.gov. This site provides an overview of the assessment plan and the agencies involved in testing air, soil, and water quality. As results become available, this site will link to those results. As you could see, you could actually just scan that QR code if you want to go there right now. The page also features a search function, and it allows you to quickly find information on specific concerns, including soil contamination, air quality, and protective measures. As we continue to gather data and share updates, we'll be launching a dashboard that will capture information related to the environmental wildfire risks and provide answers to questions asked by residents in the impacted areas. This includes understanding what is being tested and how these assessments matter in the context of wildfire recovery. With that in mind, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Nicole Quick, the Chief Medical Advisor for the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health. Dr. Quick brings extensive experience in environmental health and emergency preparedness, and she'll help explain why we're monitoring air, water, and soil, as well as the different ways wildfire pollutants can impact health. She will discuss the primary routes of exposure, ingestion, inhalation, and direct contact, and the potential dangers posed by fire debris, ash, soot, and lingering smoke. With that, I'm turning it over to Dr. Quick. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I think we can get the next slide here, please. I want to start by emphasizing that our priority in public health is to ensure that residents have the information and resources they need to protect themselves and their families as we recover from the wildfire's impacts. One of the most important ways we do this is through environmental monitoring, specifically assessing air, water, and soil to understand what potential hazards remain and how they may impact health. Why are we monitoring air, soil, and release a complex mix of pollutants into the environment, many of which can linger after the flames are extinguished. These contaminants can affect health in different ways depending on how people are exposed, which is why we are monitoring air, soil, and water to assess potential risks. Air quality is a primary concern as wildfire smoke contains fine particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, and other pollutants. Some of these pollutants, such as particulate matter, can irritate the lungs, worsen respiratory conditions, and increase cardiovascular risks. Soil contamination is another critical issue. Heavy metals, dioxins, and other hazardous substances from burned structures, vehicles, and vegetation can settle into the soil, posing long-term health risks. Children who play outside, gardeners, and individuals disturbing ash and debris may be at higher risk of exposure. Through soil testing, we aim to determine contamination levels and identify steps to reduce potential harm. Water quality is also being closely monitored. Wildfire ash and debris can enter drinking water supplies, groundwater, and recreational water sources, introducing harmful substances that could be ingested. While public water systems have protections in place, runoff from burned areas can still impact water quality, making ongoing testing essential to ensure safety. Next slide, please. Next, we will talk about routes of exposure. These contaminants can enter the body through inhalation, ingestion, or direct contact. Breathing in wildfire smoke, dust, or resuspended ash is one of the most immediate risks, as fine particulate matter can reach deep into the lungs and worsen respiratory symptoms, particularly those with asthma, COPD, or heart disease. Ingestion can occur when contaminants settle onto food, drinking water, or surfaces where food is prepared. Small children who frequently put their hands in their mouths are especially vulnerable to unintentional exposure. Direct contact with toxic substances and fire debris, soot, and ash can cause skin irritation, burns, or rashes. Handling debris without protective gear may also expose individuals to hazardous chemicals or sharp objects embedded in ash. The dangers of fire debris, ash, and soot, and smoke may not always look harmful, but wildfire debris may not always look harmful, but it can contain a range of toxic and hazardous materials. The remains of burned homes, vehicles, and businesses may contain asbestos, lead, arsenic, and other harmful substances. Ash and soot, which are made up of fine particulates, can easily become airborne and re-enter the respiratory system, even after the fire has been extinguished. These particles can contaminate soil soil and water, increasing exposure risks over time. Smoke residue contains a mix of chemicals, heavy metals, and carbon-based pollutants, which can settle on indoor and outdoor surfaces and remain hazardous if not properly cleaned. All right, next slide, please. So how do you protect yourself and your family? Given these risks, precautionary measures are essential for anyone living or working in the affected area. Avoid unnecessary exposure to dust and debris, and if you must be in an area with heavy ash deposits, wear an N95 mask, gloves, and protective clothing. Keep indoor air clean by using HEPA air purifiers where possible and keeping windows closed on poor air quality days. Minimize direct contact with fire debris or contaminated soil by avoiding handling it without proper personal protective equipment. Follow public health advisories regarding drinking water and recreational water use in affected areas. As environmental monitoring continues, we will be updating safety guidance based on the latest findings. Our goal is to provide residents with clear, science-based recommendations to reduce exposure and minimize health risks. We encourage everyone to stay informed, follow public health guidance, and reach out with any concerns. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Quick. Next, it's my honor to introduce Dr. Jason Lowe from the South Coast Air Quality Management District, AQMD. Dr. Lowe and his team play a critical role in monitoring air quality and assessing the impacts of wildfire smoke and airborne pollutants. He's going to provide an overview of the different types of air monitoring that are being conducted, what AQMD has observed so far, and how this data is being used to inform public health recommendations. Welcome, Dr. Lowe.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Ferrer. And it's my pleasure to speak here tonight on our expanded air monitoring efforts that are going on right now. Next slide, please. Go ahead, next slide. So to evaluate the air in the communities that are more directly impacted by the wildfire, an expanded air monitoring effort began on January 31st. This effort is to evaluate pollutants of concern at the neighborhood community level as residents are returning back to the area and rebuilding. This effort is not specifically addressing a house-to-house basis type of monitoring and is intended more to be representative of the air quality in the overall neighborhood that will also occur in 2 steps. Just a side note, this monitoring is supported by US EPA and conducted in strong collaboration with the California Air Resources Board, and we'll continue working with our public health agencies, as Dr. Ferrer had mentioned, in terms of providing this data and technical context so that we may be able to make the best health decisions based upon that. So let me start by talking about step 1 of the air monitoring, which is the mobile monitoring for air toxics. For that, the total of 4 measurement surveys were planned, 2 in the Eden fire area and 2 in the Pacific Palisades fire area. These measurements are to drive through the neighborhoods to get a survey of air toxic metals and VOCs, some of the compounds that Dr. Quick had mentioned earlier in terms of concern during the wildfires. These measurements take a snapshot of those pollutants as these mobile platforms drive by to identify potential pollutants that may have concerning elevated levels. Also, these results may help inform where to locate our phase 2 stationary sites. Speaking of step 2, as far as the stationary sites are concerned, we are planning up to a total of 5 air monitoring sites that are being deployed between the Eden and Palisades area. Placement of these sites are going to be based upon the cleanup activity, where schools and residents are coming back to, meteorological conditions, and also some of the results from the mobile monitoring from step 1. These sites will have samplers that collect samples for evaluating air toxics metals, including arsenic and lead, and also ones for asbestos. And those were the compounds that Dr. Quick had just mentioned earlier in terms of concerns of pollutants that may be in the debris and ash. These are pollutants. The samples themselves will be taken back to laboratory for analysis, so they may take a little bit of time after they're collected to be able to post results. But these are done by US EPA methods, so they're very robust, and the results from them are highly certain. In addition, PM2.5 and PM10 continuous measurements will also be collected and be posted as soon as they are available. Next slide, please. So we do have some results from our mobile surveys. This slide shows the results from from the Eaton area. And the results are looking within typical for the air toxics, so specifically for metals and VOCs. They were nowhere near levels of health thresholds, including national and state based health thresholds. And then also, even though originally we weren't looking for non-toxic compounds, we did have some measurements of methane, which is not an air toxic, but we did see some locations that showed some elevated methane. So we did work with SoCalGas representatives as well as public health to be able to do some follow-up investigations on these areas. And then we'll do some follow-up mobile measurements in these areas when we conduct our second mobile measurements. Next slide, please. So this is the slide of the results of the Palisades area. So this was conducted on February 10th, where the mobile platforms looked for VOCs and metals. And similarly to the Eaton area, the levels of the metals and VOCs were what are considered typical levels, which are levels that we see on a day in, day out basis. And then also we did find one area of elevated methane for which we did work with SoCalGas and also public health to be able to do some follow-up. Just for reference for this map and the previous map, the areas highlighted in yellow were the actual routes the mobile platform had taken. And the color scale from yellow to purple indicates the height of the levels of the compounds that were observed. And as you noted in both of these maps, the levels, at least shown for the compound lead, showed that they were on the lower level of detection that was there. Next slide, please. So next steps is to complete our mobile monitoring surveys. We actually anticipate the second round of both surveys to be completed this week. And then we'll deploy temporary stationary air monitoring stations, part of step 2 of the expanded air monitoring effort. And of course, work with partner agencies, a lot of them who are here and present. We're actively working to be able to show the data to them, discuss them in the health context, and then of course, be able to post the data publicly on our website, acmd.gov, LA wildfires. With that, I'll pass it back to Dr. Ferrer.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Lowe. That was really informative. Could we just get, I know we'll get asked this question, just a little bit of a timeline here. You're doing a second round of the mobile monitoring surveys, and do you think you'll complete that? Is that this week or is that next week? And then when do you think you're deploying the temporary stationary air monitoring stations?
Right, those are great questions. So yes, we are going to be completing both the mobile surveys and the second mobile surveys for the Eaton and Palisades area. We're scheduling this week, weather permitting, but the weather does look good this week. So we're not anticipating any further delays because of weather. And then we are looking to deploy some of the stationary sites this week, and then hoping to have the results, going back to the mobile platform, we're hoping to have our results posted on both of those mobile platform, the second ones, by next week as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know I already see a question that folks are asking, which is there any place they can go on your website where they can see where the mobile monitoring vans are going, like, and to find out where the stationary air monitoring stations are going to be placed?
Yeah, so there's no like a real-time map that shows like an Amazon delivery service where the van's going to be going. But I think we'll have some of the similar routes that were done in the first round of mobile monitoring, just to kind of get the overlap, especially in some of the areas that we saw the elevated methane, but then also to kind of cover other territories that may have not been covered in the first survey. So it's to give a general idea of each of the surveys. And then as far as, can you repeat your second question again?
Yeah, where were you going to deploy the temporary stationary air monitoring?
Right. So we are looking at several different sites, and as far as like where we're looking for the first 2 deployed this week, we're looking a variety of factors. I think there was a lot of concerns expressed, again, just being in the debris area. We're looking at, where potential concerns with staging sites. We're looking at also the mobile monitoring data. And we're also looking at kind of the concentration of like other activity that may be going on. So we're looking at all those factors to kind of be able to place them and finalize that deployment.
And once you finalize it, can folks find out where those stationary sites are by going to your website?
Absolutely. When we deploy the first sites, we'll be able to release those locations or the whereabouts of those locations, and we'll have that on our website.
Yeah, that sounds great. And again, I want to thank you and AQMD for the really outstanding partnership and your willingness to just step in so quickly. Thanks a lot.
Right.
Now, it's my pleasure to welcome Sanjay Mohanty, who's an associate professor at the UCLA School of Engineering, and he's part of the LA Fire Health Study Consortium, which is a collaborative research initiative that includes experts from UCLA, Harvard, USC, UC Davis, and other leading institutions. Soil contamination is one of the key concerns following a wildfire, and the consortium has been leading efforts to assess potential hazards. Sanjay will provide an overview of the different types of soil sampling being conducted and what has been found in previous wildfires. So welcome, Sanjay. We're really glad you joined us tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Ferrer. Next slide, please. So let me first, just introduce a little bit about what we do. My background is environmental engineering. We do soil testing and water testing for different kind of pollutants over years. So for many years, for wildfire, we do track what kind of pollutants are expected to present. And these all pollutants come from the structures that hazards just burned down. So many of the typical pollutants that we expect in soil would be heavy metals, pH or polyaromatic hydrocarbons. Anytime you burn some woods, this is what we generate. Then some VOC, volatile organic chemicals, and then asbestos if the structure has it before burning. And then some of the studies suggested that it could be PFAS or fluorinated substance, but there has not been any test for those yet. But I like to highlight what we are doing at UCLA and with our groups. Next slide, please. So this is just something that we are so excited to bring together. This is a free soil testing for our communities. Thanks to this is the Community Action Project. So this is different from the Harvard and other groups that just mentioned because we have been working in the background to bring these projects forward. And who is supporting that? The Ken Foundations. They have been very gracious in having us, the group, bringing all this my colleagues together to offer this service to the communities which is devastated by fire. So that including me at UCLA, my colleague Dr. Andrew Welton, he's at Purdue. He has tens of years of experience in wildfire and tracking pollutants in drinking water. And then we have Dr. Fernando Guerrera and Brian Gilbert. They both are in Loyola Marymount University. They are organizing this entire effort. And then also I like to mention Dr. Sari Kane. She's the founders here, and Sarah Ali. She's in Kane Foundations. How many soil will do? We have initial funding for 1,200 samples. That's quite a lot. This extent of scale that has not been done ever. So we hope that this will help us find data and increase, and will give the data to public and increase the transparency, what do you expect to find and whether this current remediation method will help or not. And we are going to test for heavy metals, 5, 10 or 12 kind of heavy metals that was mentioned by Dr. Ferrer, and also PFAS, and some of the might be expected there. So here I want to highlight there is a free survey and this website. If you go to cap.la, we'll be able to find this survey links and you'll be able to register for that. Thank you.
So I want to just pause for a minute, Dr. Mohanty, because I think this is really important. A lot of people are trying to figure out where to get their soil sampled. So this is open for people in the burn areas, in the Palisades, from the Palisades fire and for the Eaton fire. I just want to make sure people know what they can go and sign up for and who's going to be eligible.
I think, to be fair, anybody who is affected by fire could potentially submit, because, we expect that more than 1,200 people will be, there. So at the end, we want to select 1,200 samples so that it cover most of the areas. And also some of the area could be outside the burn zone because of the fire, all the rainfall that happens and carry all the debris. So we wanted to collect any property that is affected by the debris flow as well.
So it sounds great. I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that folks can go, you can sign up. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that you'll be selected, because they're limited and they want to get a good sample from all across the burn areas and some of the adjacent areas. But I do urge people to go ahead and sign up. cap.la is where you would go to sign up. And again, I think this is really a great resource. And some people can afford soil testing, and we've got listed resources on our website where you could send away to get your soil testing. But for those who don't have those resources, please, we urge you to go ahead and get in touch with the cap.la project. So, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know how important this is to everyone. So I'll
No.
let you keep going, Dr.
No, thank you. That I just want to thank the Ken Foundations who really bring us all together, and we are very excited to serve the community that has given us a lot. And I'm at UCLA. This is my work for 20 years, and I've been testing, so I'm very happy to help these communities, and we are ready here to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much. We can go on to the next slide. I do want to acknowledge that Dr. Mahante and the entire consortium will be posting those results as well. I want everyone to know that everybody who's part of the county's assessment plan has agreed to post their results once they get them, once they're analyzed, and they've done their due diligence to make sure the data is accurate. They're going to post them, and that information will be shared publicly. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for all your help on this. Our next speaker tonight is Jenny Newman from the California State Water Resources Board. Ocean water quality is another critical area of concern that may be impacted by wildfire runoff. Jenny, can you flip the slides, who's ever controlling them, so that Jenny can be featured? Jenny will share information on the ongoing monitoring of recreational waters, what has been observed so far, and the next steps in tracking and mitigating potential contamination. Her insights will help residents understand how wildfire debris may affect water quality and what precautions can be taken when you're using recreational waters in the coming weeks and months. Jenny, go right ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Ferrer. I don't have any slides. I'm just going to talk.
That's fine.
Okay. So I'm Jenny Newman with the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board. We've been working with the County Department of Public Health since the fires, conducting ocean water quality monitoring. And the purpose of the monitoring was to inform decisions about potential ocean water advisories and closures. Public health staff have been collecting the samples, and the water board is having them analyzed at our lab. So far, sampling has been conducted January 22nd, January 27th, February 6th, and today, February 18th. For the January 22nd and 27th events, we sampled at 12 beach sites that were located adjacent to the burn area, as far up as La Costa Beach and as far down coast as Dockweiler Beach. January 22nd was before the first rain event of this season, and January 27th was right after that first rain event. And for those events, we analyzed for heavy metals, bacteria, nutrients, polychlorinated biphenyls or PCBs, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons or PAHs. These are chemicals that we expect to see in water runoff after a fire based on all of our experience with previous fires in California. The results came back better than we expected. They showed levels of cadmium, copper, lead, and nickel below the water quality objectives, and they do not pose a risk to human health. The levels of aluminum, iron, manganese, and selenium did exceed water quality objectives, but these metals are found naturally in the soils of the burn area, and we don't think that they're due to the burn structures. We expect to see elevated levels of PAHs after fires in runoff and in the ocean water, other receiving waters, and we expect to see that those levels will decline over time. For the February 6th sampling event, we focused in on the burn area specifically, and we collected samples from the 4 creeks and storm drains that flow onto Will Rogers State Beach, as well as Topanga Canyon and the beach next to Topanga Canyon Creek. We expect to receive the final lab results for this event very soon, and once we are sure they're QA/QC'd, we will share them with the public. And finally, we just sampled again today. We expanded back to the original 12 sites, and we added more chemicals to the analysis, and we expect to receive those results soon as well and to share them. And then in addition to the water quality ocean sampling, we are also embarking on wet sand and sediment sampling along the beaches in the upcoming weeks. As you know, winds and rain carry the ash and debris from the fires far into rivers and streams and eventually into the ocean, which is now washing back up onto the beach. So the LA Water Board will be sampling for metals, again, volatile organic compounds, PCBs, PHs, and other constituents. And we're going to sample the beaches for as far away as where dark sand has been observed. We expect to start in the next couple of weeks, and again, we'll share that data with the public when it's available.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And again, I want to express my deep appreciation. We have a lot of questions that you already answered that came in from folks. Obviously, we love our beaches. We want to be able to use our beaches. And I know, it was hard on folks in those initial couple of weeks where we had to close the beaches because we feared that the runoff was really going to create a lot of hazards. So I think we appreciate the initial results were better than you expected. The beaches, while again, after rain events, you really need to pay attention. And we always seem to be advising you not to swim after rain events, big rain events. But I really appreciate that you're going to continue with the monitoring. You're going to post that data so that folks will know that they can go ahead and have a sense of security that we are paying attention to what's happening at the beaches, what's happening on the sand, and looking at the creeks that are feeding some of our ocean waters. So thank you so much for all the support on that. And I want to now say we're joined by Sean McCarthy, who's from the California State Water Resources Board, LA Regional Office. Water quality is a major concern in many communities, especially in wake of the wildfires. And this is, what I call potable water, the water we drink, shower with, use in our houses for cooking and cleaning. While the immediate impact on the burned areas is clear, many residents in adjacent neighborhoods also have important questions about drinking water safety, contamination risks, and what it all means for their health and daily lives. Sean's here. He's going to be able to provide the latest updates. And, Sean, I know you and I have been at some town halls together, so we already have a lot of questions about the few areas that are left where they don't have an adequate water supply, or they're still under a do not drink order. So hopefully you'll include some updates for folks in those. There's only a handful of communities now, so that those questions can get answered in your short presentation. But thank you so much for being with us.
No, thank you, Dr. Ferrer, and thank you for everyone for joining this evening. And I hope my presentation will be able to answer some of those questions those smaller communities have. on their mind right now. But I would like to spend a few moments updating how the State Water Board and local public water systems are taking steps to protect the local drinking water quality from these fires. The fires can introduce contamination into a water system through broken water lines at destroyed homes and structures, and from parts of the water system melting or overheating, releasing contaminants into the interior of the pipes. Systems that experience low or no pressure during the wildfire are susceptible to contamination from benzene and other organic compounds in the water supply lines. And to protect public health, the affected water systems issued these do not drink notices to their customers as a precaution in consultation with the State Water Board. Now, before do not drink notices can be lifted for an area, the affected water systems are conducting a thorough process of flushing, stagnation, and sampling. And at the end of this process, contaminant levels must meet all state and federal drinking water standards. The affected water systems have been systematically flushing their water mains, service lines, and then allowing the water to stagnate for 72 hours before collecting water samples. This stagnation time allows any benzene or other VOC contamination to diffuse into the water in the service line, and it ensures we're finding even low amounts of benzene and VOCs that may be present. Water quality sampling throughout the entire affected service area may be necessary to confirm the water supply is safe for use. And this can be done in phases or all at once, depending on the size and complexity of the water system. And also depending on its size and complexity, the amount of time to complete the sampling process will vary until we're confident public health is protected. Now, over the last several weeks, the water systems have collected approximately 1,000 water samples from water service lines, water mains, and reservoirs for benzene and VOCs, as well as coliform and E. coli bacteria. So far, VOCs have been non-detect in about 90% of the samples collected, and of those detections, benzene is the most common chemical detected and the only one found at levels exceeding the drinking water standard. As these detections are found, water systems are then repeating the process of flushing, stagnation, and resampling to determine the extent of the contamination, while at the same time evaluating areas of the system that can be isolated. This will prioritize addressing the water quality in the areas where standing homes are receiving water currently under a do not drink notice. Contaminated service lines at destroyed homes are being isolated, and flushing, stagnation, and resampling is ongoing. Do not drink notices will be lifted in areas when sampling results do not show additional contamination after flushing. And water systems with do not drink notices in parts of their service area have information or maps on the specific areas affected by the notice on their websites. And additionally, LADWP has a tool on their website to look up the status for a specific address in their service area. And so we strongly advise residents to check the websites for their local water provider for the latest information on a do not drink notice that's in place. Now, for residents, something you can do when returning to your home or business, first check your local water quality notice before assuming the water is safe to drink, and then follow any notice issued by your local water provider. Instructions for using water safely will be listed on that notice. And if you can operate water on your property, low flow flushing is a common tool you can use to bring fresh water into your water lines. Continually refreshing water in the lines could help lessen or limit water quality impacts you may experience. And then you will also want to thoroughly flush your lines after the water quality advisory notice is lifted. You can do this by opening up all the faucets and shower heads in your home and let them running for a few minutes to be sure you're bringing in water from the water main in the street. You'll also want to flush the water heater as well as any water filter you have under the sink and the lines inside your refrigerator, including the ice maker. If you have concerns about your water quality after no contamination is present and the do not drink notice has been cleared for your water system, most home filtration units, including under the sink and refrigerator filters, can remove low levels of benzene and VOC chemicals, but we do not recommend relying on these filtration units to produce safe drinking water while the advisory notice is still in place, as the levels of benzene detected can exceed the maximum specified for those devices, and they're not certified to remove amounts above those levels. We will also be working with the water systems on the ongoing monitoring of the water in their distribution system as the recovery and cleanup efforts continue into the coming months. State Water Board's website does have a page on the Los Angeles wildfire recovery with additional information on the impacts to the water and the recovery steps your local water agencies are taking. But you will also find links to all of the water agencies in the affected areas where you can find the most up-to-date information on the water supply provided to your home, including sample results and other data where it is available. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Dr. Ferrer.
Thanks, Sean. I think I'll start with you with questions just because you're already here. And I think you gave us a lot of information, but there are a couple of things that we got a fair number of questions on. So I know you mentioned them briefly, but maybe you could go back and just add a few details to it. There are questions about using filtration methods at homes in the areas where there might be lingering water contamination concerns. And you touched upon it for a second, but I think the question is, should I be using some kind of water filtration system now, even if my water is deemed okay to drink because there's been so much contamination? And I think the corollary to that is, if I'm in an area where we still have, let's say, a boil water notice, can I use a filtration system instead of boiling the water? So we've got a couple of questions on both, sort of the gamut of what can you expect from a home filtration system?
Sure, that's a great question. I'll answer the second part first. While there is any do not drink or boil water notice, you should not rely on any home treatment device. There's just a variety of devices available on the market. They're all certified using different test methods. So it's very difficult to determine whether or not they're capable of removing or addressing the specific water quality that's being delivered to your home under a do not drink or a boil water notice. So we don't recommend relying on home treatment devices. Now, after the advisory notices are lifted, if you're still concerned, it is entirely the customer's choice of installing a treatment device or relying on that. Like I said, those devices are certified to remove some amounts if they're present in the water, but at very low amounts. So that could provide additional confidence in the water quality that's coming through your home.
Yeah, that's super helpful because we did have a few questions on that. I think one more question, Sean, and then I'm going to sort of go to Jenny with a question as well. But and Jenny, this might apply to you as well. Will residents be notified immediately if water quality changes or new contamination is detected? And I want to note that this question is related to a concern that as debris removal continues in the highly impacted areas, there could be a chance, so I think, Jenny, maybe you can jump in after Sean, there could be a chance that it introduces new contamination. That's the fear here. And
yes.
What kind of testing are you going to be doing to make sure that that's not happening? And then how are you going to notify folks?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question as well. As the cleanup effort's going to take many months into the future, certainly there is the potential for additional contamination to occur. We haven't reached that part yet, but water systems will have to prepare a recovery plan, and part of that plan will provide additional sampling requirements as well as notification requirements if new contamination is found. And so it would be in the same manner as the do not drink notices were issued promptly after the fires began last month.
John, how often do the water purveyors need to test the drinking water that they're supplying?
I think that's a good question. We haven't exactly discussed that with the water purveyors yet. In past fires, we've seen a regular sampling protocol of about monthly to quarterly as the cleanup efforts, but every fire is different. Every water system has been affected differently, even in this fire event. So we don't expect to see all water systems working off the same frequency, but whatever pertains to their specific areas of concern.
Okay, that sounds great. And Jenny, I don't know if you want to just jump in about similar question about sort of ocean water both the frequency of the testing and then the notifications if you start finding any issues of concern.
So we are not going to get results fast enough to notify the public immediately after we sample of the quality of the ocean water. So that's why we're working with the county to look at the data in a more holistic sense and in a longer term analysis. And the county's been making cautious decisions about whether or not to issue advisories, and is being we're erring on the side of precaution and protectiveness. If the samples come back and show us anything different, then we will, as soon as we get the results, work with the county to notify the community. But unfortunately, due to the way labs work, we can't get that information out immediately.
Oh, but thank you. But you know, it won't be immediate, but it will be as soon as you get test results. So
Yes,
just
yes.
want to reassure people as soon as there are test results. I think, Jenny, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but when there was visible debris in the water and on the beaches, we didn't wait for test results. We actually,
That's right.
on your advice, we actually closed those areas because that was unusual.
Right. Due to the circumstances and the unusual nature, yes, you made the conservative, protective decision.
Yeah,
And we agree with it.
Yes, thank you. But I think we will try to, we try to operate as quickly as possible, but again, with testing, it does take a bit. I do want to remind people that we do routine testing for bacteria. We're not really talking about that today, but we do routine testing of ocean waters for bacteria. And you've seen us, both advise people not to swim because they're elevated levels. And if the contamination is great, we actually will close a beach. So I just want to remind people that there is routine testing as well of ocean waters, really for bacterial contaminants. So, but thank you. Sanjay, I'm going to move to you. I have a lot of questions here. So let me try to combine some and see if we can get your help on this. One good question I think is, what is the lifespan of toxins in the soil? And I will say this is related to a whole host of questions that people are asking around how do they, if there are some elevated toxins in their soil, like how long will that last and what can they do to get rid of those toxins? So I don't know if that's a complicated question, but maybe give it a try because we've just got about 20 questions on that one topic.
Thank you. I think this is a very important question. Me as a parent, before even as a researcher, I always wonder if my kids are playing in the soil, how long this soil will be contaminated. So that depends on pollutants. Heavy metals, they last forever, so they will never go away by degradation or anything else. Organic pollutants degrades within 10 years. That also vary with the different type of pollutants. But having said that, the soil itself, they also disappear not because they destroyed themselves, because they disappear by runoff or winds. They can carry them out from the contaminated soil. So how long they last in the property is based on if there is a rainfall or anything washing them off, like we have a rainfall recently. But many of these pollutants last for years or decades.
Sanjay, I think there's also like a host of questions around people who were growing food in their yards. These are people who are living in their houses still, but there was a fair amount of contamination. And they want to know, I think, three things. One is, can they eat food that was already being grown before the fire? But, it's like if you have oranges or you have a garden and you're growing vegetables, can you eat that food? I think the second question that people are asking is, do they need to, if they are growing and they have a garden, should they go ahead and get that soil tested? Maybe they tested it a couple of years ago when they started their garden. But if there was ash and soot in their neighborhood, even if it was just a little bit, are you advising that they go ahead and do some soil testing? And then the third question I can answer, which is, where can people go to get more information about soil testing? We have a long list of places. I think there's 4 places that do soil testing in Southern California where you can send a sample. So you can go to our website to get that. But those first 2 questions about what to do with your garden, what to do with food that you're growing, should you be throwing it away and starting fresh?
This is more of a complicated questions in the sense that I am an environmental engineer. My researcher, I study how pollutants move in soil and water. How pollutants get uptake by plants are not my expertise, but I do understand based on what I studies before. So in that sense, let me say that not every pollutant get uptake by plants. For instance, asbestos will never get into your plants, inside the plants. It may get into the fruits and everything else just from the aerial depositions like dust being on the surface. So if you just wash them off, you'll remove asbestos in that sense. Whereas metals and other dissolved organic pollutants could actually get into the plants. It takes sometimes it takes months to actually go into the fruits and everything. So based on what I read, it's not necessarily, very quickly things will go inside your plants. But it's important to do the soil testing because that's the indication of how much is there in the soil. That will indicate whether the plants has any of these pollutants or not. So I would always advise for soil testing if you are concerned, just so that for peace of mind. But again, maybe a plant scientist could answer those more details if. But I do know for the fact when we have this fire in Sonoma County, they do they find that the wine testing is very different after the fire because of the effect on the soil itself. So soil change because of fire, that will also impact. So the fruits, how they grow, everything will change. But whether that indicates that pollutants are inside the fruits or not, we don't have the answer yet. At least we don't know that yet.
Yeah, I think we had a speaker on with us on our last town hall that talked a lot about gardening. So I believe that video is posted on our website as well. And we also have on our website about a 14-page handbook on growing foods and what to do if you suspect that your soil may be contaminated. So that's related to just the normal contamination, or not normal, but the ongoing contamination that we face living in LA County, as well as, the new contamination that people may face because of the fire. So I would urge people to look there as well. I'm going to flip real quickly to Dr. Quick. Nicole, if you don't mind, we also have a lot of questions about testing after phase 2. We have questions about advocacy that people want to do to make sure the Army Corps does confirmatory soil testing. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the soil testing, some of the precautions that are being taken in phase 2, and some of the strategies that we're working on right now for there to be this risk-based assessment that are done across the county, particularly in the burn areas. So.
Yes, I'm happy to. So as far as the phase 2 and what that entails, of course, the phase 2 is the part of the cleanup process where all of the fire debris is essentially taken off of affected properties. And as far as I think, related to this question, Army Corps has determined that they are going to go down 6 inches deep on this phase 2 process here related to these 2 fires. So that means they're digging down essentially 6 inches deep, removing all this fire debris. That is done in a manner to decrease the amount or potential spreading of fire debris into surrounding areas, both during the cleanup process and transport to where the transfer stations and finally where that debris is being essentially put into landfills. The question related to testing directly related to phase 2, the Army Corps and the federal partners in this incident have determined that they are not instituting a testing component of that. To speak to what the larger group is doing and related to DPH and the testing procedure, which you can find on the assessment page, information on that. The county is doing a sampling strategy to determine potential contaminants of concern that have come from the fire debris. And that is both in structures, I should say structures that were damaged and burned within both the Palisades and Eaton fire area, as well as adjacent to that. And the goal that we are trying to get at with this sampling, this representative sampling, is really a risk assessment and letting people know what we are seeing in ash, what we are seeing within the Eaton and Palisades fire area and adjacent to that, which can help drive future discussion on any potential mitigation that might need to be done in these sort of representative areas. That sampling is planned to start this week. That will continue through March. And once again, we will be putting results of that up on the county's website, and will be updated as we get results from that with and not only will the results be shared, but also what this might mean for folks considering mitigation strategies that they might want to undertake at their own property.
Thank you so much, Dr. Quick. We have a few questions here as well, Jason, if you don't mind. This is around air quality monitoring. One is, how can residents access real-time air quality data in their specific area?
That's a great question. So as part of the step 2 of the expanded air monitoring in those areas, the continuous PM10 and PM2.5 data is anticipated to be displayed in near real time. I think initially, as this near real time dashboard is being set up, we'll post the results of those monitors daily. But we anticipate having the dashboard for those monitors shortly. With regards to the metals and asbestos, kind of similar to what Jenny described in terms of a laboratory-based analysis. It will take some time for the samples to be delivered to respective laboratories for the analysis and data to be posted online. So those aren't intended to be in that real-time fashion, but the PM10 and PM2.5 data is anticipated to be.
You might need to explain what that particulate matter really means. I'm not sure everyone here knows.
No, that's great. Thank you for teeing that up. So particulate matter is the kind of mass of these particles. So with smoke and with kind of dust and debris, there are these solids that are suspended in the air, and that's known as particulate matter. So when I say PM10, that means that those are particles that are larger. So those are indicative of more of dust that's resuspended, whereas PM2.5 is a much smaller form of particulate matter, and that's usually a result from like smoke or combustion, and they penetrate deeper into the lung. So thank you for allowing me to clarify.
Oh, no, thanks. I teed that up for you because we have a corollary question, which is, what happens to all the volatile organic compounds and the air particulates after it rains? Does it drop down to the ground and make the ground and the soil more toxic, or is the air just cleaner?
So in general, after a rain event, for particulate matter, so these are things that would be in kind of that solid form, so like dust, ash, and debris. A lot of times water will go ahead and take that out of the air. Essentially, it's just kind of water will kind of absorb it as it falls down and deposit it into the ground in a process known as wet deposition. As far as like some of the gases, it depends because gases don't behave similarly to particulate matter. So if gases are evolving, rain doesn't necessarily kind of wash that out in the same process. Sometimes chemical reactions may happen, absorbing into water, but it really depends on some of the properties of those gases. So it's depending on what the gas is, it may behave differently. But I think in terms of the core messaging for what we anticipated, as far as like the volatile or organic compounds or the gases, with the mobile platform survey, we didn't see any signs of that except for the non-toxic methane. And that was just more of a due diligence because we expect kind of the more volatile components to be more impactful during the times of active fire. Not necessarily when repopulation and debris cleanup is occurring, because we expect that to be more resuspension of the ash or dust that may be present in the area.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. One more question for you. Will there be air quality testing along the routes that the trucks are using that are hauling away the fire debris from Altadena and Pasadena? Although I'm sure this question applies to folks living in the Palisades community as well during phase 2. So people are wondering if you'll be offering any kind of mobile testing on those truck routes while they're hauling away debris, fire debris.
Right. So the mobile testing, I mean, it has a certain purpose, and that determines kind of that snapshot in time. So as far as the kind of appropriate monitoring methods, that's why kind of the stationary air monitoring, where you have kind of this continuous 24-hour evaluation in vicinities that are nearby, kind of what the staging areas are kind of one of the factors that we looked at in terms of, well, if we can put a monitor that is designated to look at the air kind of around the staging area, so it would be kind of inclusive staging area and trucks that may be going in and out of that area, and then kind of that air being affected to the community. I think that's the general strategy to address that particular question. And if there are the evaluation of that data lends itself to say, hey, this is something that we need to further investigate, then that's the type of action that this data can procure, is that, if there are some concerns with some of the data that we're seeing, the initial data that we're seeing, we can do some follow-up actions, which may, lead us to look at very specific avenues of where these pollutants may be coming from.
So it is something you are doing. I mean, you are going to be considering looking at air quality related to sort of the movement of debris.
In general, yes. And then if we need to get down to that specific level, we'll follow the data to kind of see how that works.
Yeah, that sounds great. I want to just go back to Sanjay a second, because there are some other questions about soil contamination. I mean, one is related to what Jason was just talking about, which is this issue about, when it rains, if there's particulates in the air and they sort of drop down with the rain, do we need to continue to worry about that, since the fires happened a month ago, about sort of the impact of any of the debris blows around, then it settles after rain? I mean, I think we have a lot of questions about, is this soil contamination going to keep going? Like, is this something we're going to live with for a while until all the debris is cleaned up? Or is this something that really the worst of the impacts on our soil in general we've already seen?
I think, it's a fair point to expect that the dust continue to, rise from the contaminated area, deposit elsewhere. So this process will continue, but is this at the level where we should be concerned about? That the only way to know that is by testing, because there will be a chance that some property which is not affected before now receive all this dust or mostly the runoff from the affected properties, and that might be polluted. So only testing will say that the level, whether it's a concern or not. But I think over time it's all going to be reduced, and I hope that it's reduced to a level that that should not be a cause of concern. But we'll only find out by testing that after all the remediation effort, and that's what we are doing it.
That sounds great. I think that provides some reassurance. I think it's going to beg the question of ongoing soil testing, So I don't know if you're prepared to sort of talk about the consortium. I know you're doing this one-time testing with 1,200 different samples. Is the consortium going to, taking into account what you just said, that the possibility is that we can experience contamination over time, particularly until all the debris is removed? Does the consortium have some plans to do some additional soil testing as well?
Yes or no, I'll tell you what we can do. Our hope is that we create a map to see where the locations of high concern of pollutants, so that we know these are the location with the hotspots. And then we'll continue to monitor a few of those sites in a year to come, so that at least we know how it is decreasing. It will give us an idea. But also we believe that the location will change over years because of the fact that rain and wind and everything else. So our hope is that if we get more support, then we'll be continue to monitor that in some sites. So we don't want to give up hope that we'll only look for a few locations. And then the second point is we will monitor heavy metals. That's the one thing that we'll do extensively. The way we do it is by the standard method, EPA method, is you take the soil and digest them and send it to ICP-MS, and that's where you measure the concentration. But we have a handheld tool. It's a XRF gun, which basically take the reading in a minute. What it does, it gives us the idea of where the location is high concentration of metals, and we can do that for years. That's not a concern because it takes only 2 minutes. So we are happy to do that in locations. So we'll explain that in the survey. That's why I encourage people to sign up for that, because we wanted, even we cannot select all the 1,200 samples right now. Maybe we'll have funding later and we could do much more. So that's why I encourage everybody to sign up who thinks they're concerned about, and we may be able to do it if we have more money or funding and we'll do that for years. That's our best interest to help our community.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, you can go to the website and look at the plan. We update the plan every Friday as more resources are identified. And Dr. Quick, I'm going to turn to you, and also Dr. Davis has joined us as well, just for some help on the question on soil sampling, because I know that we're partnering with one of our state agencies to also do some soil sampling. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about plans. We have a lot of questions about soil sampling in parks, at schools, at rec centers, at daycares. So I don't know if you want to just talk about, what the plans are that we already know about that we've posted.
Yeah, I'd be happy to just do a recap on that, and then Dr. Davis certainly can add anything that I missed that's important. The sampling plan that I referenced before that we're doing with an independent contractor is really meant to give us some good information for folks that are living or residing near areas that have significant burn structures around them, as well as adjacent to the burn areas. So as we get results from that, that's really going to drive or really inform our ability to get out to the community some of what we've seen in the ash in the fire area, in properties in the fire area, and properties adjacent to that. So once we're able to speak to what that looks like, we'll have advice for individuals related to any further need for testing in some of these areas, as well as any potential mitigation. So that's really what we're trying to do with that. Related to the school question, I think it depends on location right now. We are aware that many schools have conducted their own testing of outdoor areas related to bringing kids back on campus and having the, lots of questions from parents and just in general being concerned about kids and exposure levels. So we do know that testing is taking place in the school systems as well. As far as state agencies and testing, I think that's still an active area of discussion right now. There are definitely state agencies that are interested in testing and are looking to see how they fit into the larger response structure as well. And we will continue to report out on that element of testing. And once again, I'll just recap for folks that joined a little bit later. The testing that the Department of Public Health is doing soil testing wise, that is planned to start this week, with testing going through the month of March. And we will be, as results become available, certainly bringing that to the community to report out on that.
And we are doing public sites, so I just want to reassure people, like,
Yes.
we will be doing some parks, we will be doing, we will be doing public spaces where, people are currently using those public spaces as well. So, so I want to note that that is part of this initial testing that the Department of Public Health will be doing. So, and again, there's a comprehensive plan. It really shows all of the different places that folks are going to be testing, and then those results will be posted. I'm gonna flip back to a couple more questions on water and water safety. Jenny, for you, there's a question: is any water testing being done near the Eaton Fire? What about our arroyo or the drainage area for Eaton Canyon?
So I spoke earlier just about the sampling we were doing with public health on the beaches. The water board is also involved in an effort to coordinate all sampling by all local agencies, nonprofits, academics, and our permittees, and it covers the Eaton Fire area as well. I don't have any results to talk about today because a lot of that data may be coming from when I say our permittees, I mean entities that we regulate, that we require to do their own monitoring. So I don't have the results there yet. But through that coordination effort, we're hopefully going to be identifying any data gaps and going out and filling them as well in the arroyos and other areas in the Eaton Fire burn area. So I don't have the answer now as to what the results are, but yes, we are also.
So you're doing testing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think everyone appreciates that. I think there's a question probably switch over to Sean for a second. A question about a water softener, and I'm sure there are many people that are using water softeners. Do we need to fully flush everything out multiple times and throw away all the salt? Like, what do you need to do if you were using a water softener?
It's a little outside my
I know.
expertise, but I would say yes, it would be recommended to flush several volumes of that softener out and replace the salt, replace any filter media if you have it, because that will absorb the benzene and other VOCs if it's present in the water. So you want to make sure that you're starting off with a completely fresh filter after you flushed your household piping. Yes.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, lots of people are are going to be going back and turning water back on.
Yes.
So, and trying to use it again. Sean, we got this question a couple of times. I know you talked about this, but people are asking, like, where do they go to get the results of all the tests of water, given that there's so many different water purveyors? And how do those samples get released to the public? So
Sure.
I think this is a really important question because there are over a dozen water purveyors that were involved in areas where there were burns or adjacent to burn areas. And I think it's reasonable for us to be able to explain, like, how, like, those water purveyors, that's your water company. They do this testing, and people are wondering, like, well, I have no idea where those results are. How do I see those results?
Correct. And I think with the multiple water purveyors that are doing the testing at the same time, we're receiving results electronically into our database, but it's not very accessible to the public. It is publicly available. However, we're encouraging the water systems to release this information on their website. And I was checking this afternoon, several of the water agencies we've already cleared the do not drink notices, like City of Pasadena, do have their results publicly available on their website. And so that is the method we're asking water systems to release the information.
I'm just wondering, is there any way we could work with you, since the data is reported to you, to figure out how we could make that, I know we can't do that today, but
Yeah.
But I think people have a lot of questions about the quality of their water. I think some people have had a question about the quality of their water before the fires.
Correct.
But it would be good if we could figure out an easy way for folks to get results, because all of the water is tested routinely. So it would be good for people to understand, how would you find that information out? And because I think the corollary to that is people are asking, what are home water testing kits that people can use so that they can check their own tap water because they don't know where to go get results.
Mhm.
So I think it ties into the question about, I don't know where these results are. But we can answer, we're trying to figure out a way that we can get more information to everyone. But also, I think maybe you could answer about these home water testing kits.
Sure, I think there is a variety of ways we can release the information to the public, and I think it's a matter of how much data we want to make available. In terms, we have data results, but we don't have addresses. Water systems will have the full information behind their water quality results. That's why we encourage them to use their own tools to release this information. And as far as the home testing kits go, we don't rely on those, and the water systems don't rely on those to make any decisions in terms of whether or not the water quality is safe or it's safe to lift a do not drink notice. And we don't advise residents to use those home test kits for the same purposes. Water systems and State Water Board, we rely on data that comes from certified state ELAPS accredited laboratories and EPA approved methods for producing results. The results we get from those home test kits are not comparable to the data we use for decision-making purposes.
Yeah, that's very helpful. So I think we've got to do a better job making sure people can see those results.
Yes.
So that they just have more confidence in knowing both the frequency of the testing and then what those results are. So I appreciate that. I mean, I public health, we get involved when there's contamination in the water systems, and we will issue water advisory notices, et cetera. But I think the public needs better access. So let us work on that. We appreciate your feedback on that.
Certainly.
I'm going to go back to Jason just because we have dozens of questions, Jason, that all are about the impact of the wildfires to the air quality. And what is the geographic reach of those air quality issues? And I think it's similar to what people were saying about the concern around the soil. As long as there's ash and debris that still is in in large quantities in the neighborhoods that experienced a lot of the burn, there's questions about ongoing impact to air quality. There's questions about lingering impact to air quality from the burn. And then sort of what's the geographic reach of those concerns? That's a lot, Jason, and do answer whatever makes sense for you.
Sure. So let me start off with maybe some of the initial reach of the wildfire. So when the wildfire was actively going, we have our regional air monitoring network, which collects air monitoring data at multiple sites across the South Coast Basin. So when you look at some of the data that's part of there, it's also available on our website to look at some of the sites, such as one we have in central Los Angeles, we have one in Compton. I know there are some research sites at Pico Rivera, as well as our kind of research grade equipment also at Huntington Park, which showed that air quality during the wildfires for the initial few days did show some elevated levels of those pollutants. I mean, obviously, people were looking to the AQI, or the air quality index, which measured for like PM2.5. Again, those are those smaller particles that go in the air because of smoke. But also we were looking at the air toxics, and we're looking specifically at the heavy metals, as has been reiterated multiple times, a concern here, both soil, water, air, et cetera. So at the regional scale, seeing the elevated levels of these metals during the times of the initial few days of the wildfires, shows the reach that some of the particles can have. But then after a few days, we noticed that on the regional scale, those levels of elevated metals declined back to what we would consider typical levels, because we have these ongoing air toxics programs, so we know kind of what the range of typical levels is. So as the fires became more contained, the levels across the region were a lot lower. Now, that's why we wanted to get back to this kind of expanded air monitoring effort to kind of look at the air, like your exact same concerns, like, where are these potential, air toxics and how far are they reaching? And that was part of the purpose of the step one of the mobile air monitoring of both metals and also the gaseous air toxics. So we can kind of go into the two areas, both Pacific Palisades as well as the Eaton fire area, and kind of see, do we see any elevated levels with that survey? Again, that was a snapshot, but we were able to kind of go, as we showed the map earlier, of like going kind of farther away from the debris cleanup areas and then approach towards the areas that were heavily impacted with burned buildings, debris cleanup, et cetera. And even the areas that were farther away, we did see levels of those particular compounds kind of within that typical range that we would expect in background air. So as far as like where we are right now, the two snapshots that we saw January 31st and February 10th, respectively, in those locations showed that, there wasn't elevated levels. We're going to do that second round of surveys this week to see if the results are similar with those snapshots, and kind of going outside of where the immediate debris area is, and then kind of going in to kind of see, is it still all within typical, or are there areas that are either inside or outside or both that may have elevated levels. So we'll see how the second survey turns up, and again, we're looking to have those results by later next week.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jason. One more question. Really related to what you were just talking about. What's the threshold level of airborne toxins that triggers emergency health warnings?
So I think this is where we work together with the California Public Health, as well as the Office of Environmental Health Hazards, as well, of course, with your office, to kind of determine what kind of levels that may concern to do that health action. Again, we're going to provide data. We're going to provide a lot of context to the data, and then work with the groups in public health that have kind of that health perspective to be able to give that guidance. So it is a collaborative effort between our expertises, and will be exciting to do that in the future. And we are doing it now, obviously.
Thanks so much. Dr. Davis, I so appreciate that you've joined us. We do have a lot of questions around recommendations for vulnerable populations, pregnant women, older people who are living near burn areas. They're in their homes, they're living near burn areas, but they're very worried about exposures. So I just wonder if you could talk for a second about what you can do, what you might want to think about doing if you're living in an area that's very near an area that's been badly burned. And obviously some of these questions relate very much to the advisory that we issued, really noting that people that were living within 250 feet of fire debris were at elevated risk. So I wonder if you could just, talk to both those issues, vulnerable populations, and then the advice for the general public.
Yeah, I appreciate the questions. So first off, what we generally say is that if phase 1 and phase 2 fire debris hasn't been cleaned up, there's always an elevated risk of potential for exposure. And then, of course, the closer you are to fire debris that has yet to be cleaned up, the more your risk could be for being exposed. So for folks who are going back into those areas, there are a couple of things that I would say, or even if you're outside of the area. One, your risk of exposure is really going to be based, a lot of what you can try to assess it with is how much ash and soot are you getting on the outside of your house. So if you're outside of the burned area, but you notice that, every few days you start to see a buildup of ash or soot that was more likely coming from, the burned area, or potentially other contaminants, air pollution in the air, then there's a risk that there's a potential exposure ongoing in relationship to that. And so really paying attention to air quality is one measure to look at as a proxy for what might be in the air in terms of pollution. And then following the advice based on what that air quality index is in terms of how to reduce your activities in order to reduce exposure outdoors, et cetera. And also, really paying attention to, if you're going to be dealing with ash, making sure that you're wearing protective equipment, N95 mask, P100 mask to prevent breathing in dust or ash if it happens to be kicked up in the air, as well as using gloves in terms of handling things that have ash or soot on them, or even doing the cleanup of your outdoor, area if you're cleaning windows, etc. And really just paying attention to that, how close you are, wearing protective equipment. But we generally recommend that those who are pregnant and children or who have underlying health conditions, take extra precautions. Children and pregnant women in particular don't think they should be in fire areas in terms of especially going through debris or ash or doing cleanup just to reduce that potential risk of exposure, because they may be much more sensitive to the health effects if they get a bad exposure related to that. So now, in terms of the advisory, it was really looking at some studies that were done before, just in terms of people and their reported symptoms, and 250 yards in terms of being within 250 yards was generally around where a lot of people started to experience symptoms or report symptoms that they may have experienced, in that distance. And so we had lots of questions from people trying to figure out a distance when you say near. So that was just something to give some sense of what may happen. However, as was mentioned, depending on the weather, the wind, how strong it is, and if debris is not all cleaned up in terms of phase 1 and phase 2 in particular, which is going to take up the ash and the other dust and debris that's on the property, then there's always a risk that the wind can blow and take the ash and the soot and fire dust further than that 250 yards. So really, you do have to pay attention to air quality. You do have to pay attention to how close you are, and you also need to pay attention to how frequent you may see soot or ash on the outside of your property.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Davis. I think that was really helpful. I want to remind people, and we'll have our tech team post these links in the chat. Make sure you know how to get to our site. We have very specific information on our site for reducing your risk, recommendations on extra precautions that you may need to take. We have information around your gardens, your outdoor areas, and obviously we have the assessment plan. And that assessment plan will be the place where you can go to get a link to all the results. So as results start coming in from the studies that you heard about tonight and the sampling that's going to be done, please frequent that website so that you can be up to date on what we're finding. We'll obviously continue to do town halls on a very regular basis so we can answer your questions and also put in front of you the people who are actually conducting the assessment so you can talk directly with them. I want to note, we're almost out of time. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to our speakers tonight. I want to thank Dr. Lowe, Dr. Mohanty, Jenny Newman, Sean McCarthy, Dr. Quick, and Dr. Muntu Davis for taking time out of their busy schedules, joining us and being accessible. We didn't get to all of your questions. We will go ahead and group them into different themes, and then over the next few days, you will see us amend our frequently asked questions sheet that we keep up on our website to try to get to all of the responses to the questions you've asked. You've been great about sending us really important questions tonight. We appreciate your partnership and your assistance. And, again, we're here to be of service. So please continue to let us know how we can help throughout the recovery process. With that, I'm going to say good night, and we'll be scheduling another town hall in the next week or so.